So last time we saw Balakrishnan Menon as a young child playing hide and seek with Bhagavan Shiva. He grew up to be a young teenage boy, loved dressing up, loved hanging out with his friends and laughing and joking, and loved playing tennis, swimming. Eventually, as he grew, he ended up in Lucknow University, where he studied English literature and law. He loved reading poetry and he was part of the debate club. He was even taking part in theatrical plays. So you can imagine what a great speaker he was then, too. In 1942, things became a little more serious in Bharat. There was the Quit India movement. And many Indians were rising up against British rule. They were protesting against British rule because Indians wanted India to be free. And so there were talks, there were leaflets, there were discussions, and Balakrishnan Menon was a huge part of that. He gave public speeches, he wrote things, he distributed flyers and pamphlets, and he spoke out against the British rule. And he said that Indians should be free. Meanwhile, thousands of people were being arrested. They were being thrown into prison. And Balan knew that people were after him. So he hid. He went into hiding for some time, and then he joined the British intelligence as a person who was decoding messages for them. He was there for a couple of months, and after that he thought maybe things would be a little better. He returned to Punjab, and all of a sudden he was arrested. He was arrested and he was brought to jail. And those times, the jails were so dark and there wasn't even any light or ventilation in the jail. The conditions were so poor that many of them got sick, including Balan. He contracted typhus, which means that he felt very weak and was freezing. And because he was so weak and his body was almost going to die, the officers just took his body and threw him on the streets. And he was lying there, just shivering, just lying there with no one. All of a sudden, one Indian Christian lady was driving by and she saw someone who looked just like her son, who had the same nose as her son. And so she took Balan in. She rescued him, she took care of him, gave him food, gave him shelter and medicines, and nursed him back to health. He was so grateful. Little did she know that she was going to save one of the greatest masters of all time. She nursed him back to health. And once he regained that, he felt that he should go visit his cousin, Achyutan Menon, in Baroda. So he went to Baroda. And when he went there, his cousin wasn't there, was traveling. He dug out his cousin's old typewriter. And this stir for the freedom movement was so deep in Balan that he wanted to get involved. He wanted to do something. But he knew that if he were too active, then he would get caught and back in jail. So he started writing. He started writing to expose the views of the poor in India, the suffering in India. And thus began his career in journalism. He eventually joined the National Herald and wrote articles for them. One day, as he was sitting in his office, he stumbled upon a magazine. This magazine had an article about a Swami. upon reading that, Balan's life would change forever. What was that article? Who was that Swami? See you on the next Chinmaya Mahima. Om Shri Chinmaya Sadgurave Namaha.